I moved to Atlanta in 2005, and I ended up in this chaotic place of loneliness, trapped, and stuck. I describe it as isolated survivalism. I've written out a personal vision statement, which is thriving together. That's the vision that I have for my life, for my family, for my community. It comes out of experiencing the hell, the opposite of that, the misery of isolated survivalism. And there is an interesting connection to that in social media. When I was in that deepest, darkest, loneliest place, I was doing some things online and I got noticed. Some particular people that noticed me reached out to me. And so I was alone. I was trying to do some stuff and I got someone that connected. The problem was is these people were very toxic people, but
Right.
they saw me. I felt seen. I felt acknowledged. I felt part of something. But because they were toxic, part of me wanted to make them proud or show off for them. What that did is it created this orientation in me to create more of the type of content that was toxic because I was trying to do it for this toxic person. Some of the stuff I did, I have regrets and I'm ashamed that I said and did certain things. When you become vulnerable, when you're online and that vulnerability is showing, then the toxicity can find you and capture you. Welcome to a Share Life Academy workshop. Today we're going to talk about bridging the divide, finding connection in an age of isolation. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and in this episode, I'm joined by Allen Helms. Allen, say hello.
Hello?
And I'm also joined by Jim Karwisch. Jim, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
If you don't know Allen, he is a HubSpot and Salesforce CRM Jedi. He's doing the Lord's work, helping companies get out of marketing qualified lead hell, MQL hell, as some might know. Jim is a narrative coach, and he helps people understand what is holding them back and how to get what they want in life and work. He'll also be leading this workshop about community and isolation. This is the 7th seminar that will conclude this series. 6 of those workshops have been with Jim Karwisch leading. This episode will act as a launching pad for Jim Karwisch's new podcast, which is called Everything is Narrative. I will be joining him for the first episode of Everything is Narrative, so I'll be providing you with information about that in the future. Jim's going to take us on a roller coaster ride through this topic of community and isolation, so I will let you take it from here, Jim.
Sick. The first thing I thought, if we're talking about isolation and we're talking about loneliness, is to talk about the difference between those two and kind of set the stage a little bit for the different types of feelings and experiences that people are having. If you can figure out where you land within this, then it might make it easier to find a starting point and how to deal with the situation and to improve the situation for yourself or for others that are around you in your life. So when we think about isolation is really about not having people around you. That's the typical, right? Not physically being around other people. So being isolated, the way that most people would think of, I'm out here by myself and everyone else is away from me. If we're talking about loneliness, we could also be talking about I'm lonely because there aren't people around me. But I think what's going on right now is a deeper loneliness and a deeper isolation, which is I am around people. They're in my life. They might even be in the same house with me. They might even be in the same job, the workspace as I am. But I feel the same loneliness as if I were not, as if they weren't here. Which, and you guys can pop in here anytime and talk about your own level of this if you want to. But when we have no one around us, if you think about Tom Hanks in Castaway and you think of him inventing the character of Wilson, which was a volleyball that he talks to for part of the thing, right? He's literally isolated and he's literally as lonely as you can be. And he's creating a character to try and interact with. So if you go from one end of the spectrum of I don't have anyone, no one is connecting with me, no one is around me, I can't see anybody, all the way to the other end of there is somebody in the same room with me on a daily basis, and I feel disconnected, I feel lonely, I feel isolated. And then one more potential is in the climate that we're in right now, in the world that we're in right now, I feel like I'm disconnected or I'm isolated from people that are not going to be able to talk to me at a depth, right, that I feel safe talking to them about. So we're polarized to a certain extent, and we don't feel like we're safe to talk about certain things. And so we can't be authentic. We can't share with people and be seen at a deeper level. And so that by itself can feel isolating or feel lonely, right? So if we think of it as, I feel lonely when my wife goes out of town, right? I'm so used to my wife being there. My son stays with me, and my son is there. And so I'm not technically lonely in the sense that I don't have anyone. I can talk to my son, we can hang out, we can play games and that kind of stuff, but there's a feeling that I don't have a connection. I don't have, I'm isolated from a particular person that is normally very connected with me. And so when she goes away, even though we're texting each other, or we might have a call in the evening if she's on some sort of a trip or vice versa, those types of loneliness are different than if you were in the same house with that same person, but you felt like you couldn't talk to them about certain things. So where does that land with you guys?
I'll throw out a couple things. One, just this idea of like when you're facing a challenge or difficulty or suffering, feeling alone can make it feel like 10 times worse than it. And if you're alone with your, like, our rationality is partially is dependent on community. So we kind of lose our minds if we're alone and suffering, and we feel that sense of forsakenness or abandonment. And that can be more pronounced. So like there's literally like people around you that you can't talk to, either because you feel trapped to speak, or you feel unsafe to tell that person. So there's a shame dynamic there that I think about. And then, another layer that when it comes to loneliness or feeling alone is, when I had my marketing company, when I shut it down, I went into freelancing. So I went from having a business with a team to having a business where it's just me. And in that transition, one thing I realized about myself is that I was using the team as a shield, in the sense of like it was like my blanket, my safety blanket, like it made me feel better because now as an independent freelancer individual, I was facing the world directly. There wasn't any barrier between me and the world. An upset client, or a client that didn't pay, or a project that failed. Like I didn't have a team to kind of absorb that. It was like I had to absorb it directly. And so I realized, in some ways, maybe in an unhealthy way, like I was uh, avoiding being alone with myself to not have to face those feelings. And that transition helped me face those feelings and then work through them. So those are two things that stick out to me when I think about it. There's several others, but I'll pause there in case Alan wants to chime in.
When y'all are talking, I'm thinking back to the cliche of talking about being lonely versus being alone, which was a lot of what Jim was talking about, isolation versus being lonely, and how much of it's the physical situation where you're in the same room or in the same community with certain people, but you don't feel seen or heard or able to have a discussion or a connection, or all the things you just discussed, feeling comfortable and vulnerable enough to have a conversation with someone, or just the confidence level to bring up certain topics, versus, and I don't know if it's a choice. I mean, some curiosity is around, how much of this is a choice that person goes through to say, well, I choose to be alone. I choose to be by myself for a weekend to recharge. If, for example, I'm an introvert versus an extrovert, where you pull your energy from. So how do those factors affect choosing to be alone and isolated versus going and seeking out community?
Yeah, that's great. That's a natural segue, Alan, into the next point that I have, which my work is in narrative. I process everything through narrative. When I think about what Alan just said, of how much of it is a choice, how much of it is how much confidence I have in a particular situation, it leads to, what is your inner narrative? What is the thing that you're telling yourself? What's the story you are telling yourself about the situation? Our narratives protect us from certain things, and the depth of the narrative and the strength of that narrative holds might be out of proportion from the actual risk. It might be that we would be able to do something, but we feel as though we're not safe, and so we don't move forward in that particular situation. So if you went from the extreme of a hermit, right, someone who lives in maybe they live in a shack or live in a cave somewhere, and they literally don't want anyone else around them. They have made up their minds that humans are, I don't want them around me. I do just, I have these animals that are around me. I'll have this, here's my dog, and here's my chickens, and I'm fine. Like, I don't need anybody else. And they've made a decision. Their narrative is now really wrapped around, this is what life is. And life is about not being around people, right? So you might have the narrative that people are evil. You might have the narrative that people are too much trouble. People can't be trusted. Needing people is a weakness, right? Those types of thoughts.
Well, and I'll add too, like, just kind of a personality layer, where we're coming from. So I'm highly extroverted. I'm in like the 90th percentile of the most extroverted people. So for me, I'm coming from a place of like natural relational community seeking, whereas an introvert may be coming from a different place. So that transition that I went through was also difficult because of my orientation in a personality sense.
To my mom just the other day, as a matter of fact, I didn't connect it with this topic until you just said that, but she said, I was just thinking about it the other day, but I probably would have been just fine if I had just gone and lived in a monastery. And, or if I were I'm that type of person. She's that much of, bless her heart, she had to deal with me. I'm a theater person and an extrovert. So she had to deal with me all those years as I was growing up, and she would have been fine if she'd just been left alone by everybody. So I think if you gain energy by being around people, which is how we define extroversion versus introversion, right? So how is our internal battery and our connection related to when we are around people, how we connect with those people, how are those people pouring into us, how are we pouring into them, and what's the net effect after we're done being around those people? I gained energy from that situation. Right, I went to a party and I came away with a lot more energy, and I'm going to use that throughout the week. My girlfriend, and I'm not saying my girlfriend, I'm married, but I've got this other person in my life who's an introvert. She went to the party with me, and she needs to go rest for 2 days after having gone to that party. So the amount of connection that people need of a certain type, I think even introverts have a certain type of connection that they need, and they can almost be sideswiped. They can blindsided. Sorry, that's the term that I was looking for. They can be blindsided by the climate that we're in right now and the way that the world is behaving and communicating with one another. Introverts can recognize all of a sudden, whoa, wait, it isn't just that I'm fine if I'm not around a whole lot of people. I'm actually disconnected from a very important person to me, or a very important type of relationship, something that I needed, and now that it is infringed upon, I don't feel safe in that relationship, or I don't feel safe talking to that person. Now I had a very small circle that was cut off, I feel like, and so now I feel worse. You can't really say worse or better, right? We don't know each other's inner states. Who knows if any one person is feeling any worse than anybody else in this situation? But comparatively, they are feeling worse than they ever had. And they didn't really think that it would bother them that badly if they weren't around people. If we jump back to when we were in COVID, right? Very beginning of COVID, people are starting to process what it was to not be around people. Some people thrived. They just thought, this is the best thing ever. Can we just do this for a while? And we did. And then other people were like, I don't know how to function in this. So much of my world and my ability to be in the world revolves around me connecting with other people. And I'm going to have to learn new skill sets in order to be able to deal with this. So when you talked about it being a choice before, Alan, and you talk about, did they choose this? Are they not having enough Are they not having enough confidence to bring a particular thing up? Do they feel like they aren't safe? Do they feel like the other person, if here's one more. If I didn't know someone as well as I thought I did before all of the things that have happened in the past, how many years are we going on now where things really have shaken up a lot? Are we on 6 years now?
Well, COVID, we're at 5, 6 years, but
Five,
I
six
would say
years.
the last decade for sure.
Yeah, the last decade. Yeah. So, so when we think about the way that things are changing, and people are becoming more emboldened to say what they think out loud and in many different formats in many different ways, you might realize all of a sudden that someone that you really thought you had a deep connection with and that you thought you knew really well, you absolutely didn't. It's just that the level of connection that you had with them felt good and it felt safe and it felt like something that was rewarding. But as soon as you know that person on a deeper level, suddenly your judgment comes in, their judgment comes in, your misalignment comes in. You feel like you have different values, and all of a sudden there's a disconnection. So even if you still see that person, just like you saw them before, you see them in a different light or through a different lens. And so now you
Yeah.
can feel disconnected from someone when the only thing that really changed is that you recognize you didn't know them like you thought you knew them. And so for somebody who's an introvert, going back to what you were saying before, if they only have a certain number of people that they're around and they're in those situations for that amount of time, and it's really specific. We see each other on Wednesdays and we have coffee and we talk for hours about all this stuff. And then suddenly that one thread that was connecting you to people is severed. What does that do to the person? How are they impacted by that? Any thoughts, Jason or Alan?
Yeah, well, the idea, the disconnect between words and actions, and in the sense of like, um, if you're connected with someone for a while and they say things, and then all of a sudden they act in a way that seems contradictory to the things that they said,
Absolutely.
then it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And so then it's a matter of like, well, maybe they're not as sincere about those things, or maybe I misread those things, misapplied them. Like there's a lot of layers that could untangle there for sure.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that comes to mind. Alan, what do you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I do. I find it funny. I mean, the one example that Jim brought up is interesting to me is if you've known someone for a long time and and felt a closeness to them for a while, and whether it's COVID or anything else, maybe there's a political conversation that you have or something along those lines, and all of a sudden you realize that you see the world differently than this person sees, or that you assume that they saw, or maybe they've changed, or maybe you've changed. That can have, I've seen that have a big effect on, obviously how often you want to hang out with that person, and then what kind of boundaries you adjust on how you want to interact with them in the future, or how you choose to interact with them in the future, and how often you want to interact with them.
Yeah.
So I'm curious why that has such a profound effect on a person. Sometimes when you reach a point of disagreement, and there seems to be, this is an oversimplification, but sometimes there's one of two different approaches you can take to that. One, you're intrigued, you're interested, you're curious why they changed or why you feel differently about them, and you want to explore that, versus the other approach is you just shut it off. You shut it down and say, no, if they don't see things the way that I see them, or the way I want them to see them, then we can't interact anymore.
Yeah.
And so what makes those two situations different?
Yeah, there's there's a couple there two things I can think of that I've done that have created a really intense reaction. So the first thing I did that it created a really intense reaction with some friends and family was when I had my marketing company in 2013. In the Old Testament, there's this passage about the Sabbath year with the farmland. Every 7 years, you're supposed to let the land rest. So we decided to take our company through this Sabbath year. And for the year, we would kind of apply these principles to our company. And that ended up being the last year of the company. So ended up being a transition year towards shutting it down, which we didn't know when we started it. But I had some friends and family that had a very strong reaction to us doing this. They're like, this is an Old Testament thing. Like, this doesn't apply to your business. Like, they kind of had all these reasons, but there was just something about like how they saw themselves and how they saw the Old Testament and this particular application of it that just like kind of really offended them, or maybe just challenged how they saw things in a way that because we were taking this action, it made them look at themselves in a way that maybe they weren't ready to. I don't know exactly. And then the other big one was me over the last couple of years getting politically public and active. I'm a Christian, and I'm also a Republican, and I've been against Trump. I've never got on the Trump train, and I've been vocal about the risk and threat that he poses to our country. And I voted for a Democrat. So that also created a very strong reaction with people I know. And also, to your point, Jim, like, wait a second, maybe we don't know each other as well as we thought we did, because you went this way and I went that way. As a Christian, my aim is, like Alan said, to have the boundaries and set them, but it's also to keep the tension in place. It's that faith and redemption that even those that have gone a different path can come back, or maybe I've gone off the rails and I'll come back.
When you go through a couple of situations like that, how do you choose or decide upon which person you want to continue trying to engage with versus the ones that you cast aside?
Well,
Yeah,
Say
I think
it's not worth, I don't want to
go
engage
ahead.
with them anymore.
I'll let Jim take that one.
Well, and I'm racking my brain right now for the name of the town that was in this particular news story that I watched. But it was a town that everyone worked together. They were neighbors. They were friendly with each other. If somebody was hurting, they all banded together and helped that person. It was very tightly knit, but it was also very, very polarized as far as their political beliefs. And the thing that I found really interesting about it was, and this is how I separated it, but it could be interpreted by anybody's viewpoint. But the way that I interpreted it was the expectation from the time that these people in this community, from the time they were born and raised in that town, all the way through into beginning to be an adult and making their own choices. They grew up in a situation where the person next door was politically different than them, and they were clear about it, and they saw people accepting each other. And so they grew up as like, yes, we are different. And also, if we have trouble, we support each other. And also, if that person needed to get to the hospital, we would immediately do such, right? Like there is no difference between any of us as far as our community, just because there is a difference between how we view things politically.
But is that because of how they were raised? They were given... is it simply a matter of being exposed to different ideas?
I think it's expectation. I think it's what you feel blindsided by, right? So I think when you're growing up, if you had giant Komodo lizards that wandered around your town, and they were just everywhere, and people fed them apples, and then you bring in somebody who has never seen one in their life, and they're everywhere, and they've been hired as a new teacher at this school, and they weren't even told that there would be Komodo dragons. That person is going to have all of these reactions in a way that the people who live there would never understand. The people that grew up there from day one are never going to be able to process that. They were raised in this environment with these expectations, and so they've never been confronted with anything different than that. If you grow up in a predominantly, let's say that the town that you grew up in everyone was Democratic, everyone was a Christian, everyone was a farmer, everyone was a all the way down the line, and then a black person moves to town, or then you leave the town and you move into another community where everyone there is a different shade of brown, or you move closer to the border, and now all of the people who grew up in a different country than you are sharing their cultural beliefs with you. And so if you were never exposed to it, you're assimilating and you're trying to reconcile all of those things in one moment. That's my view of this is when you recognize, just like we were talking about a minute ago, if you recognize that somebody that you think you've known for many years, you think that you've really known them, and then suddenly you find out that you don't know them, that's happening. That whole shift, that disorientation, that reframing of how things are working happens right now.
Yep.
And so the difference between growing up with that person recognizing that they are the only other kid that you have to play with in your neighborhood, and they're very different than you, and you've come to terms with how different you are and figured out a way to live with each other, is different than I thought they were one person, and suddenly they show me the person that they were all along.
Yeah, I want to read this little. I saw this the other day on marginalrevolution.com. It's a commentary on this situation in India, and the title of this is called The Paradox of India, and I think it captures what you're describing. In 2004, something extraordinary happened that perfectly captured India's unique nature. A Roman Catholic woman, Sonia Gandhi, voluntarily gave up the prime ministership to a Sikh, Manmohan Singh, in a ceremony presided over by a Muslim president, APJ Abdul Kalam, in a Hindu majority country. And nobody commented on it. Think about that. And how many countries could this happen without it being the story? In India, the headlines focus on economic policy and coalition politics. The religious identities of the key players were barely mentioned because, well, what would be the point? That is how India works. This wasn't tolerance, it was something deeper. It was a lived experience of a civilization where your accountant might be Jain, your doctor Parsi, your mechanic Muslim, your teacher Christian, and your vegetable vendor Hindu. Where festival holidays meant everyone got days off for Diwali, Eid, Christmas, Guru Nanak, Jayanti, and Good Friday. Where secularism isn't the absence of religion, but the presence of all religions. That came to mind as an example of what you're describing.
Absolutely. And imagine being born into that community, and when you start to ask questions of whoever it is that has a hand in raising you, which could be, depending on, it takes a village, it could be any number of people that are answering your questions that are those different religions and are of those different viewpoints.
Yeah.
So when they say, oh, why is that person different? Well, I'm asking this person who's a part of my village who is different. And their answer to that might be different than the person. But if everybody's unified answer is this, well, that's just the way things are. We are all different. We are all, we have varying beliefs. And you go, oh, they seem okay with that. Everybody seems okay with that. I guess I'm okay with that. And you aren't asked in that moment, well, that person over there, you may think that you know them, but they're likely going to try to kill you at some point in time. You would not, right? You would be like, oh, we're different and that person is scary and we're all pretending. This is horrifying. I might be attacked at any moment. So they set the stage for you for the life that you're living. And so when kids are growing up, the answers that they are given to the questions that they ask, their curiosity and how it's handled, right? If every single thing that you question, if you don't see anything different and there aren't any different viewpoints, what are you going to ask? Right? What are you going to be curious about? Now we're in a world where if you just got on your Instagram reel, my cousin who sends me Instagram reels every day, like he's one of those people, that's his love language, is he just sends me 500 Instagram reels and I need to watch
his
all
love
of them.
language is Instagram.
Instagram, yeah. But he'll send me things, and I realize after a little while he didn't always do that. But the day that he started doing that, and he has never stopped. Not that I would want him to, but everything changed about my Instagram. Because the algorithm picked up what I was watching, and I was watching things that he shared with me. And so suddenly the tone of what Instagram thought I would want to see shifted. And I was like, oh, okay. So now these things that he's sending are a part of me. And Instagram sees that as a part of me and assumes that if I'm opening all of these things up and watching all of them, that they must be how I view things. Well, sometimes he sends me things that are like, I'm fine with somebody falls off of a horse and they get up and they're like, oh, I'm fine. And they dust themselves off. Like, I'm cool with that. But sometimes I'll just get something where I'm just like, did that person live through that wild, like,
did that truck kill him?
Are they dead now? And so the algorithm goes, oh, okay, I get it. I know what you like. And so I start getting things in my feed. And I'm like, whoa. Like, like, no, this is my boundary. This is the edge to what I now. I don't judge him for that being something that he has in his Instagram. I personally would rather not have that question enter my mind: is, did I just watch somebody die? That I just that right, that's my threshold, and it's different than anybody else that's around me. So Alan, did you have you look like you were just about ready to say something.
There's a couple different directions we could go on that. It's just, again, it's fascinating to me that the different tolerance levels that different people seem to have, whether that's nature or nurture. So there's sort of that nature nurture discussion going on about, kind of like what we're talking about with being introverted or extroverted. Naturally extroverted, you're going to seek out and probably have more touch points, more interactions with people. But then you may also feel, you're chemically wired to feel more alone when you don't have anyone in the room, right? And so how much of it is nature versus nurture? And then if we wanted to, another obvious, rabbit trail we could go down to is in social media, which is, does social media amplify our connectedness? I mean, supposedly some of the social media creators created it to improve the connectivity of people and to improve and amplify the interactions that people have. But then at the same time, I think what some of us are experiencing now is more antagonism. And then with the algorithms creating certain bubbles around what you're constantly viewing and just feeding you more of the same, you can just start going into a different state of mind, which is alarming to some folks. So there's a couple things there that I find interesting.
Well, one of the things is that the way that you go about getting Stephen King at one point in time. Now, I'm not saying one thing or another about Stephen King or how good of a human he is. I'm just using a reference to something that he mentioned at one point in time. But he talked about writing as being a way of transcending time and also teleporting thoughts, basically being telepathic. And he wrote in one of his books, I'm talking into your mind right now. Right? I think it's in his book on writing. But he's like, I'm typing into you are reading these words that I typed at a different time. I may have never met you, and yet I'm sharing these thoughts. Well, now you've got this telepathy that anybody at any point in time can share anything that they're thinking, whether they've thought through it well or not. And they can share anything that they have received from someone else, and they're sharing it back out again. And it doesn't matter how much they've really thought through or even digested the thing that they received, right? Sometimes I'll get things forwarded to me that the person didn't even read, and that will make me go like, wait, did you mean to send this to me? Like, this is pretty crazy stuff. And they're like, I didn't even read it. It's by this author, and that author, I know you like them. And I'm like, okay, don't do that because because I was totally prepared for this context. And you just sent me something, and this is not at all what I would expect to see from you, because I would expect that it would reach your threshold. Oh, well, it didn't, because I didn't read it. I just forwarded it.
Yeah. Well, I think of like Twitter specifically, but you could probably apply this across social media too, Twitter X, as like our societal brain just thinking out loud. Like it's what's going on in our head. And so it's just now being made visible when it wasn't quite so visible before. And I think to my experiences about having like doing these things that had these visceral reactions in my own life, like there is something about social media that you do get in terms of the algorithm, it can shape around what you want to see. But then if you are connected with people that are different, you're also going to see what they see and how they see the world. And so you're going to be exposed to that. And you're going to have that reaction. We're all going to have that reaction, right? I'm going to have that reaction to somebody that I think is like way off the grid and morally or whatever. And I'm going to see that. And maybe it was already there before, but now I see it. Like now I didn't see it before, now I see it. So the sort of the act of seeing makes us aware of things like to a level that if you don't have a framework to prioritize
Yeah.
and do something with it. Kind of like what you said, Jim. Like, I don't want to see what I don't want to know if this person died or not. Like if you don't have a way to handle that, then it can lead you to some dark places.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how would how would you control that in social media? Because you don't control the algorithm. I mean, I guess you could, if you had a lot of time and a lot of intentionality around it. I guess you could try to train your algorithm by only clicking on things that you want to see. But I think we've all experienced you do a specific Google search that somehow gets handed off to Facebook, and the next thing you know, just because you were looking at buying a new Ford truck,
Right.
all of a sudden you start getting served Ford ads over and over again in your feed.
Right.
And the algorithm's obviously got its own desires and own purpose and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And then you've got the same thing with just state of mind. I mean, just by the friends that you have in your group, if they're all interested in a certain thing, you're probably going to be fed. So I guess you could go out and defriend or unfriend all the people that you grew up with, and then try and seek out and alter your friendship group. But I guess the question is, I mean, with social media, I don't feel like you have as much control over the algorithm and what you interact with. So
Well, I guess
go ahead. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it depends on this. Like, I think something like Twitter, X, Blue Sky, Threads, those are more topical. Like, you tend to connect with people that have some shared topical interest. Whereas Facebook, at least historically, has been more, or even LinkedIn, like people you've connected with probably in real life, and now you're there. So my neighbor might have a completely different religion or political view, but we're like literally next to each other. So I think, connecting with them on Facebook, we may not see things the same way, but they're my neighbor. So that kind of creates an interesting overlay. Whereas on Twitter, I mean, me and Jim met on Twitter before we met in real life, and it was a shared topic. It happened to be an Andy Stanley sermon. So, so that I think you can shape, if you're shaping your algorithm like on social media where it's interest, I think you have more control over it. But for me, I use Feedly, so I just have my own feed. I put all the things I want in my feed into there, and then I use Feedly, and I don't rely as much on the social media feeds. Although I think the YouTube algorithm is a lot better, because YouTube, at least the long form content, tends to be more fruitful type of content, whereas like social media can be very like instant, like it's trying to get you to watch like a second, a few seconds. So it's more like it's going to be stuff that's kind of more junk food. Whereas, so I think the YouTube algorithm is better, one, because the content's better, but you could, I guess, still end up in some junky places on YouTube too. But I think the feed is going to kind of, reveal some stuff about ourselves too that we may not like, and so we might have to set boundaries around, what we use and how we use it. So.
Yeah, there's a couple of different metaphors that I use when talking about this, and it takes social media and we just put it back into the physical world again. So it's not a perfect analogy, but I think it does the purpose. So if you imagine that you lived and worked at the same place, the town that you live in and that you grew up in, everybody works for a particular factory. That's what the whole town is around. There are some people, there's a handful of people that work someplace else. There's other stuff, like there has to be a grocery store and all that kind of stuff. But like 90-something% of the people work at this factory, and they work pretty much the same hours, and they come in at the same time and they leave at the same time. And there's only so many places to go if you're on break or if you're at lunch or whatever. And so when you leave working for a little while and you go to a place to eat your food, the people that are around you are going to be talking about whatever they're going to be talking about. And you're going to be there and you're going to be hearing what they have to say. And so your ability to process the wild things that they're saying is going to be dependent. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that would probably go into it, but a big one is that that person tends to talk that way about these types of things, and if you're going to be around them, you're probably going to hear those things. And if you want to do something about it, you could try to, impose your will and say, I want you to stop talking about that in public because that makes a lot of us uncomfortable, right? And you could do something about it. But if what happens in most situations is, oh, that's so and so, he just is that way, right? And
Yep.
so when somebody starts acting wild and crazy, somebody new moves to town and they're like, is that guy insane? And they're like, that's Joe. Joe's harmless. Joe seems like he's not harmless. Joe seems like he's like, is Joe crazy? And they're like, just don't worry about Joe. Joe's here. Joe does a good job at the factory. He goes to church every Sunday. Don't worry about Joe.
Right.
So when you look at your social media and you think, number one, I have the ability to engage with this social media or not. So that's one choice. Another is I have the ability to set my mind in a particular place when I go into the social media to be able to prepare for, right? When I go to Instagram, I'm probably going to see a few things that I'm going to be like, no, I actually don't want to see that. And then I've got to, thumb it down or whatever. But if you go in unprepared, to experience a lot of these things, and you're not clear on your own values, you're not prepared for the fact that people are going to have these wildly different opinions, uh, or you're somebody that you're just you're wound so tight on a particular issue that if anybody says anything different than what you believe on that, you're going to get viscerally upset. So if any of those things are true, you're just not prepared to go into it. You're not intentional about your thoughts when you go into it. You're just not ready. Then you're probably going to get hit with things differently than, you know what? It's time for lunch. I'm going to go in and I'm going to sit down, and probably Joe's going to say a lot of wild stuff, right? Second thing I was going to say, and then I want to see what you guys think. Second thing is that I have different levels of intentionality and different reasons for different social media. So Instagram I handle differently than I do TikTok, than I do Facebook. So when I go on Facebook, I know what I'm going to see because the people that I have friended there are literally the people that I know. It's not tailored. I don't have some people that it's like if I know you and we are friends with each other, then you're my Facebook friend, right? And that means that when I go there, and if you have a really, really strong political message and it's different than mine, I'm probably going to hear it there, right? When I go to Instagram, it's going to be different. When I go to TikTok, it's going to be different, and so on and so forth, right? So when I go in, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go check Facebook. The length of time that I spend on Facebook and how I engage with Facebook is different than how much time I would spend on any of the other social media, because I know that I'm walking into uncharted territory of what might have happened that day in the news and what people might be saying about it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll throw it back to you
Well,
guys.
Alan, I guess I'd be curious, like, what do you see as the connection between social media and loneliness, or in community or lack of community?
So, well, I think we may want to talk about what is the problem of loneliness. Are we trying to, are we trying to attack that as a universal problem? Or is it only a problem when a guy gets so lonely that he, ends up doing something horrible and winds up on CNN because he, killed some people or something?
Right.
So,
Right.
or is it, just a depression type thing? So that's one part of it I'd like to circle back around to. But in answering your question, I think social media it seems to me to be, it amplifies, it's a new way of communication is kind of the way I look at it. So I think it has, and to Jim's point, I think it's probably different on all the different levels, right? If I'm talking to my teenage niece, there's certain social media platforms that she wants to use, and she uses them for different reasons that would not even occur to me, right? So sharing outfits with her girlfriends, right? I mean, so maybe that it's just a way that they communicate, or they have a different messaging app that they prefer to use that's different than the messaging app that I use. So I think it's a part of it is just a different channel, and how where we used to communicate, communicating by voice versus communicating by sign language versus communicating face to face versus communicating over the phone. So at a very fundamental standpoint, it to me is just a platform of communication. But then tied to that is, again, each platform has its pros and cons, right? So if you're face to face, you can see body language, you can read facial cues, you can judge the context of the environment that you're in. As Joe's talking about, if you're at a familiar lunch counter when you're surrounded by people that it's a whole different conversation. Versus, if you're just typing something out on your computer, there's a buffer or perceived buffer in what you're saying. And, obviously I think the challenge society has is people are a bit emboldened or don't think through what they're posting, and just fire off a very dangerous or slanderous or regretful comment that they might wish they hadn't sent, or they might have softened in a different channel. So I think that's part of it, is just that. And if I just circle back around, I mean, I'm kind of going around in circles, but I think the other piece of it is just with anything else, it's amplifying. I mean, where people probably weren't communicating in the past are now communicating. So people that were stuck living alone and in their own bubble are now given a platform where they can communicate, and you can start seeing different signals, different mental illnesses coming out that someone else could have hidden because it took a phone call to actually seek a one-to-one conversation. Now you've got a broadcast type of a conversation, and now it can be expanded. So there's a lot of things going on there.
Well, I want to add let me throw a couple things in there. One, I'll just, on the communication piece and the internet as a whole, but social media as part of that, messaging as part of that. If you remember in the Transformers movies, the character of Bumblebee, he had no ability to speak. His voice box was broken. So he used the radio, and he would scan through the radio, and as people were saying different things, he would pull what they were saying in to say what he needed to say to the person. So you'd hear him, like 3 words from this guy, 3 words from this song, 2 words from this sportscaster. And I think that's kind of how I think about, like, I think memes particularly, like, it gives you a way to say something, to communicate something. Maybe you don't have that ability to do it, but it gives you a voice when you didn't have it. And that can kind of be good and bad in 2 different ways.
Right.
But it can also be fun and exciting for, when you have like friends and stuff, with animated GIFs and memes and stuff. So it also can create shared languages. And so it creates a whole new cultural layer that the younger you are when you expose to those, the easier it is to integrate those into your sort of way of doing life. The other thing I would say is I moved in 2005, and I kind of ended up in this chaotic place of kind of loneliness and just trapped and stuck and isolated. I describe it as isolated survivalism. And I've written out a personal vision statement, which is thriving together. That's the vision that I have for my life, for my family, for my community, it levels up. And a lot of it comes out of that experience of experiencing the hell, the opposite of that, the misery of isolated survivalism. And there is an interesting connection to that in social media that I want to make, which is when I was in that deepest, darkest, loneliest place, I was doing some things online, and I got noticed. And some particular people that noticed me, um, reached out to me. And so I was alone. I was trying to do some stuff, and I got someone that connected. The problem is like these people were very toxic people, but
Right.
they saw me. I felt seen. I felt acknowledged. I felt part of something. And so, but because they were toxic, that part of me wanted to kind of make them proud or kind of show off for them. That what that did is it created this orientation in me to create more of the type of content that was toxic because I was trying to do it for this toxic person. So that was kind of that was like MySpace days. So social media was earlier. I'm kind of glad there wasn't as much as the stuff now because some of the stuff I did, I have regrets and I'm ashamed that I said and did certain things. This person was in California. If the internet wasn't around, this person would have never found me. And so I would have probably been safer in a sense that I worked through my issues in a smaller environment, and that got a little bit bigger. And I'm really grateful I didn't like get as big as some of the stuff that's out there. Part of the dynamic is when you become vulnerable, when you're online and that vulnerability is showing, then the toxicity can find you and capture you.
One more thing is the pace and the lack of barrier to entry for sharing the thoughts that you have. So one thing that I've noticed is that I have friends that when they are really upset about something, speak differently than they do when they're calmed back down. And I know that about them, right? And so when they start talking, I'm like, you probably just want to wait, like, why don't you give yourself like 10 minutes and then talk? Because right now that's crazy talk, right? But now you take that same person. I'm trying not to make too many. I don't want to make this a fire hose of information, but take that same person, bring them out. They aren't all that emotional, but go out for drinks. And same problem happens. They have a few drinks and they start talking in a way that doesn't represent their values. The idea that going out for drinks with this person means that you might be experiencing something where they say something they don't really mean, or they do mean it, but they don't mean it to the extent or to the emotional level that they're sharing it. And so you're like, this person, I understand them and what they would actually do, how they would act on this. And I've seen them in the real situation, how they would behave. They get into another situation where they're emotional about something or they've had a few drinks. They talk like they would do something different. And so now you take that type of talk and you give people the ability to say it instantaneously with no partner to give some sort of a, hey, not right now. They can say as much as they want to, as quickly as they want to, and there's nothing that's blocking it.
Well, I think the biggest thing there is it's the difference between a one-to-one conversation. If you're out having drinks and talking with someone, or having a one-to-one conversation and someone gets heated,
yeah,
it's all based on your one-to-one relationship. But most of these social media platforms are public, right? It's a broadcast. It's a one-to-many conversation, and you're putting a lot of information out there across a different audience. And so, I mean, there could be 20% of your friend group agrees with you, 20% violently disagrees with you. There's a group in the middle. There's family. There's friends. There's coworkers. And I don't know if it's the danger, but the thing about that is, I mean, you're having a one-to-one conversation that everyone's part of, and you may not want everyone to be a part of that. And it's so easy. It's just like you're saying, the barrier to entry to simply post something on Facebook or Instagram is, I mean, all you do is type it out and hit send, and boom, it's done. It's just knowing what kind of channels. I mean, that's one thing I've tried to consider. This is just go, I mean, this is going to everybody. I don't want to, am I clear that this is going to everybody versus when do I take this offline and just have this conversation one-to-one with this person? So, I mean, trying to learn those different types of techniques while you're on social media.
Yeah. Well, and take it away from social media for a second. Let's just do a different take on it. Back when we were really newspaper heavy, right? Back before social media, someone could pay a lot of money and take out a full page ad in a major newspaper and say something that was their belief. And there were certain things that it would happen. People would be talking about it. In fact, it would be in the next newspaper that people were talking about the previous edition of the newspaper, right? Because something that would have affected society in general, because the word was getting out there. But when someone went to the trouble, it stated something different about their intention. When somebody would spend the money, make the phone call, fill out the form, they had to get it in by a certain time for it to be in the next edition. The person who received it probably was like, "Are you sure you want to say that? Like, this is wild, right?" Or there was an editor that was like, "Well, we don't let people put that kind of thing in the newspaper, right?" Like there were certain things that might be in the way. So if somebody got all the way to the place where that thing was in the newspaper, they had plenty of time to calm down. They had plenty of time to think through or whatever. And it still is in the newspaper. And so it was taken with a different weight. So now, if someone is taking the weight of reading something on the internet as if that person had full intentionality behind it, they thought through it, they spent money to do it, it had gone through other people to look at it and make sure that it was okay, and then you saw it, that'd be very different. But I think people do. They feel as though they are personally attacked by that thing that person said in a format and in a way that was too easy for them to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so I a lot of times when I read things that would normally make me angry if they were said to me one-on-one, but I read it and I go, okay, well, this is rage baiting. Or I read it and I go, bless their heart, that person's probably intoxicated right now and is just going to town on social media. I'm going to take this with less, like I'm not as upset because their words don't have as much weight to them. Other people, everything's the same to them, and it's all like they're being talked to by one person face to face. And you can tell when they read it, they are instantly red-faced, their heart's pumping, their adrenaline's going, and they're yelling back at that person. How dare you say something like that? Or how dare you put this out there for everybody to see? So I think our preparedness and our context, it's confusing. It's confusing at all the time. Like you have to really get your bearings if you're going to gauge what type of reaction you should be having to this. My wife is very susceptible to it, and she will have big reactions sometimes. And I'm like, honey, that's the reaction they want you to have. That's rage baiting. They wanted you to be upset, and so if you do something back, that's actually a part of the game. That's a part of their plan. I'm sorry, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so knowing the game you're playing and knowing what your goal is, and then figure out how to move towards that goal, I think is the higher level. But the source and weight thing is really helpful. Andy Stanley, in his one of his sermons, talks about how source determines weight. So your father saying something's going to be different than like a stranger at Starbucks.
Right.
Just the nature of the relationship, and maybe sometimes it should be the opposite, like because of the topic. The weight determines impact, and then impact determines outcome. And so having a weighting framework, I think, is super important to determine. Like the way that I think about it is, like, if you're going to continually to engage with me in bad faith, then I'm going to take that weight and, like, maybe I have like a default weight, like I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and then you kind of earn trust or lose trust. And then if you lose all your trust, then I'm giving you 0 weight. I'll always leave a door open if you want to kind of come back into the fold, but I'm going to focus on people that have higher weight, be, for the most part. So that's kind of where I've been shifting, and it's seen people. I think I historically would give people more weight than I should have, out of optimism, out of a false optimism, in the sense of like, I didn't want to see them for who they really were. I had to see them, okay, this person is just toxic or terrible or whatever, or just isn't interested, or maybe they have another agenda and I'm not even reading what that is. So I would kind of just give them more weight than I should have. And so now I've been practicing taking that weight to the bottom and then interacting with them as if they have that amount of weight. And so it's kind of can go the other way too, where you don't give someone weight that you should. you've given them zero weight when maybe you should listen to them.
Uh-huh.
So maybe that would be like a teenage boy that doesn't listen to their parents in an extreme example. But it could be an adult too, not listening to their spouse or whatever. So,
Sure.
Alan, what do you think?
A lot of the conversation is about communication styles. To try and circle it back around to the original conversation is what does that have to do with loneliness versus being alone? And is that really, who's having the problem with this? Do we see that again as a universal challenge? Is the idea that do we see this as a epidemic of sorts of loneliness? Is that what we're seeing as the problem, or is it just a simple matter that we're trying to grow into different types of communication styles, and we're just having to learn different skills?
So to answer part of that, part of what came up when we were planning for this talk is a public health crisis is what is being called in the U.S. So experts, including the U.S. Surgeon General and World Health Organizations, warn that loneliness carries health risks comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so they're calling this a public health crisis of loneliness. So these are people that are worried about the health of people overall. And so as things are shifting, changing over time, the conversation could be one-on-one conversation of, Alan, how are you doing? Are you feeling lonely? And then we could look at it from our own community. How are the people in our community doing? But now it's like, it's how is the world doing? And if you're not talking just about the things that got brought up earlier, like you recognize somebody's mental health that you didn't realize before because of how they're communicating, you recognize somebody's political leanings, you recognize their values are different than yours, all those types of things. I think because we are moving further and further away from needing to be physically around each other, we're increasing the ability to communicate with each other and with very little intentionality necessary in order to do so. We've shaped we've shaped an environment where you can feel attacked, you can feel unsafe, you can feel all sorts of things to a point where you can feel alone when you're surrounded by people. You can feel disconnected when everyone's around you because what's running the show underneath, the operating system in your mind, is now all scrambled up and your narrative is different than it used to be, right? You don't feel like that person is valuable enough for you to share with them. You don't feel like you can trust them. You don't feel... Same person, different context, different level or depth of knowledge of them, those types of things. So I think that things are changing so rapidly, communication is happening so fast, and we are physically more and more distant from one another than we have been in the past, that people's mental operating systems are not upgraded to be able to deal with that. And so you combine that with COVID, you combine that with the political landscape and things that people are feeling safer and safer to talk about more and more boldly. I think more and more people are feeling less and less safe or less and less loving or caring about other people. They're feeling more and more jaded. They're feeling more and more judgmental. They're more and more polarized. People out of their life. The number of times that I see people are just like, yeah, I had to cut out like 10 people out of my life because of what they said about this one post. And it's like, okay, do you mean like people that you kind of know? Or did you like cut out people in your life that were like deeply rooted, relationally complex members of your community that you cut out because of one thing they said about, right? So I think our ability to handle the current situation and the current world, some of us are doing a little bit better at it than others, but I don't know that we're catching up as fast as we need to be, or as would make the world able to be processed.
Level up quickly.
Yeah, we've got to level up in order to be able to handle a lot of what's going on.
So in regards to the loneliness epidemic, here's kind of some stats on what are the leading causes. And this is based on a survey. So 73% of people think the loneliness pandemic is caused by technology as a contributor. So that's why I think we keep ending up talking about it. 66% say insufficient time with family. 62% say people are overworked, too busy or tired. 60% of people say mental health challenges that harm relationships with others. 58% say living in a society that's too individualistic. And then no religious or spiritual life, too much focus on one's own feeling, and the changing nature of work with more remote and hybrid schedules were perceived causes loneliness by around 50% of people. So that's an interesting couple of layers. The technology reveals things. So I'll give you just a practical example. We had one car, I think this was last year or a year ago, year and a half ago, and we had a situation where I needed to get somewhere, but my wife was using the car, and so we only had one car. So I literally asked my neighbor to give me a ride, which he did happily. And now all of a sudden we have a car ride together. Like we're having a social interaction. We're having community. The technology of having two cars, which is a fairly also cultural thing in a family, um, is makes it so I don't need my neighbors as much. But because we had one car, I needed my neighbor. And by needing other people, you see them more and you interact with them more. And then when you have needs and you help them and they help you, then you build that relationship kind of naturally, organically. And I think a lot of what's happening with technology is it's removing those organic levers and triggers for community. And we have to actually choose to do those things intentionally versus just it happening organically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, imagine that you lived at a level and at a level of need where you counted on the people immediately surrounding you in the community for certain things, and if they didn't
Yeah.
hold up their part, or if they didn't do their
Then we
thing,
starve or whatever.
we starve, or we freeze to death, or we like all these different things, right? Or our children don't learn, or I mean, all sorts of different things, and
Which gives
so
us purpose too. Like that's a purpose
yeah.
layer, which is if people don't need what you have to offer, then what
Yeah.
purpose do you serve?
But it also gives context, and it gives weight. It helps us to weight some of the things that we were talking about earlier. If somebody says something to me that I find to be wild, but it's the same person who pulled me out of the river when I was, like that person got out of their car, saw I was in the river. They grabbed my arm, pulled me out of the river. We exchanged information. I thanked them so much. I offered to buy them some lunch or whatever. Like that person is now like they saved my life. And then later on, I found out they have some pretty intense beliefs about some things. Okay, well, in one case, I know exactly what that person would do if I was drowning. And in the other case, I know that they have some beliefs, but where does that put me as far as how much I'm willing to be curious about why they believe what they believe, or to know more about
Yeah.
how deeply they believe what they believe? Are
Yeah.
they parroting something else that they've heard? So how much do I weight this, and how curious am I about going further into this? And so if you remove all that need, and all of us are pretty much like we would be fine just having DoorDash, and we could live inside of our own homes with no need for anybody else except for the DoorDash person, then what balances out any of the things that we hear or see that are coming at us
Yeah.
through the
Well,
technology that we were talking about a minute ago?
and one just quick layer I'll add to that is we can trust people for different things and not it doesn't have to be like a blanket thing. So for example, I may not trust Jim to fly an airplane, but I might trust
You should not.
when it comes to coaching someone, right? So I think we can be more complex sensitive to our trust. Like you may not trust someone, you may trust someone to fix your car, but not to watch your kid. Like I think we can be more selective too in certain ways.
Yeah, and if the level of depth of knowledge about a person, really knowing somebody versus exactly the amount that you were exposed to in a particular way, right? And
Yeah.
so when I've sat down and had deep conversations with people in my past, and we discovered that we had something that was fundamentally different about us, many of those situations led to us having ongoing conversations about those things while being friends with one another and supporting each other as far as community went. So we would
Yeah.
discover, like, wait a minute, we've got a values that seems off from each other, but instead of saying that we're just not going to be around each other, it it caused us to lean in. And I want to understand more. I want you to tell me more. Tell me more stories. Tell me more about how did you grow up? What caused you to think this? What is it? What is it? I want to understand you at a deep enough level that this makes sense to me from what I'm experiencing of you as a person and what you say you believe, because this doesn't seem like it can resolve. Like, it doesn't seem like this all comes down to one person, right? So does it make me lean in? Does it make me lean back? Does it make me want to cut it off? And so if we don't need each other and we're not around each other and we're hearing things that are unfiltered and coming at us all the time, it makes a lot of sense that we would go, nope, 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 right? And that there would be uh, all sorts of opportunities that we wouldn't ever get or take uh, because of because of the context, because of how the situation was presented to us.
Yeah. Alan, start pulling us in here and packaging us into something to take away.
I don't know if I'm qualified to do that. It's an interesting conversation. I thought it was fascinating that we were talking about really just different conversational and communication styles at the end of the day, when the original conversation was supposedly about loneliness.
Let me interject this and you keep going, but I would almost say that the conversation, rather than being conversation styles, I think what we were talking about was connectedness, that connective tissue between us, which is conversation, which is social media. The things that connect humans to each other is the way that we share our thoughts with each other and how we are interacting with each other, which is very different than before.
Yeah, yeah, it's different, and and it just makes me wonder what's happening again, because it's we've got more ways to communicate than ever before,
Yeah.
and is that part of the problem? So, I'd be interested to dive into this a little bit deeper and maybe isolate some of the problems and or causes that we think are happening if we truly believe it's an epidemic. And then I'm curious if the idea is to bridge the gap. I mean, how we spent a lot of time, most of our time here, just talking about common issues and experiences we've all had and questions we've got about it. But I'd love to. I don't know if we can summarize now, or if that would be a different podcast to talk about ways that we've seen to actually solve that problem. Are there ways to decrease loneliness? Because I don't know that we've gone into too much of that today, into how do we solve that problem. I
Well,
think we all agree and
yeah.
recognize there are problems, but how do we solve that problem?
Well, we littered throughout all of this. We've kind of left a breadcrumb trail of our different thoughts about what would need to change, and along the way, one of them was the weightedness that Jason brought up earlier. Right? Can you intentionally weight someone's opinion differently than someone else and get yourself to have a different reaction and a different level of reaction so that you don't cut people out of your life or don't put up walls if you don't need to in order to move forward? Another of those is the level of intentionality and curiosity that we can have around following up or understanding somebody better. So if we feel like we're lonely because we just don't like people, that's different than we're lonely because we didn't feel safe and we cut off all communication. We're not connected to all these people. Well, if you wanted to start opening up those connections with people again,
Yeah.
and you were going to do so in a very intentional way, the waiting would come into it, right? The level of depth that you already have with that person, the curiosity, all of those things would need to be kind of warmed back up again. And you would need to think about, well, I don't have people in my life. And why don't I? Because all of this came so fast. And it was so intense. I didn't feel safe. So I just shut everything down. And so did the people around me. And so if I wanted to start reversing that process, it would need to be about intentionally creating avenues of connection with other people. Who are those people? How do I choose who they are? Who do I invest my time in? And what do I stop investing my time in that's causing it to be worse?
Yeah. And let me come piggyback on that. So intervene in people's life. And the one powerful way to do that is to create a safe place. And one way to create a safe place is to share your story with people. So when I think about when I was isolated in survival, I felt trapped. One of the particular areas that I felt trapped was pornography. And so I had a friend who shared his story of going through that and getting through it. And I felt safe to share my struggle with him because, hey, you've gone through this, you've suffered. So I feel safe to share this with you. And I was. But he also intervened, he was there. And so I think intervening in people's lives, sharing our story, and that requires being vulnerable, but it also means sharing the things that are probably scary to share. So we got to work through that process. I'll even use Jim as an example. Like some of it is intervention that's providential. Like there's one situation I was in like several like years ago that I was struggling with, and Jim just happened to call me at the exact moment I needed him to call me. I answered, and we had this conversation, and he was available. So having conversation in relationship with people and keeping that active, when those things happen, we're more likely to be there for the person when they need us, and vice
Yes.
versa. And those are really two powerful ways. And then I would kind of tie in mentorship, or like you could just say relationship.
Yeah.
But having people, if you are struggling, someone that can intervene in your life and walk alongside with you. Like I moved to Atlanta from Arizona. We left everyone and everything we knew, and we were isolated and alone. I had a lot of toxic community, but I got to the point where I was like, God, this isn't working. Like, help me. And started getting rid of the toxicity, and then God started bringing in healthy people into my life to mentor and intervene. So those are some practical things. If you want to get started, just find a guy, start getting lunch together once a month or once a week, and then add another guy and add another guy, and all of a sudden you got a small group of people, and you work through your struggles together. That's an option.
Jason said are all weighty things that are all very intentional, that are all related to something where you're trying to make a situation different than it currently is, right? That mentorship thing or asking somebody to lunch, like you are investing in someone else and you're investing in that connection and you're asking that the other person join you in something. And so if there is a severed connection between people, and you want to regain it, that level of weightedness, importance, you're pouring yourself into somebody else in a way that's not superficial. And I think the only way that we can combat this really extreme, fast-paced fire hose of social media is that we counteract it with intentional, individual, weighty, powerful mentoring and supportive and caring relationships.
Alan, any final thoughts you want to share with us?
A couple things that I've tried to use to combat loneliness are one which I've talked about is, that's how Jason and I got somewhat connected, is just having a weekly group of fellow, solo entrepreneurs in the marketing field. And then we would meet weekly. And we found that a lot of times we ended up talking about a lot of different things other than marketing. But that built a community and it built a familiarity with each other, and it gave us a consistent weekly place to go and talk to someone that we just knew were going through a lot of the same types of situations together, and we're trying to help each other out. So there was a noble desire to that. So that's one. And then I don't know, I still struggle. It's kind of like telling someone the key to, don't be depressed, just feel happy. The key to combating depression is to not feel sad. I'm thirsty for something beyond that, which would be, if we talk about something like intentionality, it takes effort to be intentional about something. Yeah. That person has to make that step. And there's just so many aspects of courage or aspects of energy or aspects of willingness or desire or motivation to even get to that point.
Yeah.
And the problem that I have with some of this conversation is that it doesn't get to the core of a lot of the motivation. Part of the challenge with loneliness is if you're cut off, if the onus is on you to stop being cut off from everyone, what are some things that you can do to challenge that? And so it could be as extreme as, changing your setting, moving. Does that, move, if you move to another city, move to another town, I mean, that could have a good impact on some people and a bad impact on others, right?
Right.
Depending on whether or not you have the energy to go out and try and meet someone new. I don't know. My mind's just overwhelmed with kind of a structured way to approach loneliness, and if it is truly an epidemic, what do you do about it?
There's a difference between solving loneliness and improving the situation. And I think what I generally look for in my process is to try to find something small and make an experiment to try to make the situation better. Because solving for it feels so weighty and so confusing that it would be almost impossible. So my challenge to someone would probably be, if you imagined all of those connections that might have been severed due to a lot of these different things we talked about today, if there was one person that you thought that your relationship was weighty enough that you felt like you got severed with them, but you think that it would be worth spending some time with them and reconnecting with them, what is one small thing that you can do in the next couple of days or week that would get you connected with that person with some sort of a gesture or communication that you would like to overcome the disconnection that's happened? Or if you just want to use a positive spin on it, you could just say, hey, I feel like we haven't talked in a million years. Can we get coffee? And I think the difference for someone who feels completely and totally isolated and lonely, who suddenly has someone they're going to go have lunch with, the margin that they would shift in loneliness would be almost immediate. So I think huge thing is, what are all the things that we could do to make the situation better overall over time? Is a giant conversation we need to continue to have over time and keep digging at it. And the smaller conversation is, what does tomorrow look like because we had this conversation today?
I would add to that, you have to look for the lonely person in the sense that, like, you're not see them. It might be someone that there's people around them, but they feel alone. You have to go deep enough to figure out that's happening. Sharing your story and being vulnerable makes it more likely they'll be willing to share. Also, if they're more lonely, they may not be as accessible. Like, that's where the intervention, I think, comes in, is like someone intervening in your life. If you feel lonely, like, one person can make a transformational difference, but it's usually going to require intentionality and intervention on their part. I would say providential connection where God reveals that.
Good.
So,
and thank you, Allen, for challenging this too, and for you really did uphold the point of view of the listener and held us to some really good answers and questions. So thank you.
yeah. So, Allen, tell us, who are you and how can people connect with you if they're interested in learning more or reaching out to you?
Yeah, I don't do a lot on social media, but my name's Allen Helms. I'm based in Atlanta, Jason, as you mentioned, and I'm a CRM consultant. So I do have a profile on LinkedIn, so you could find me on LinkedIn. And and then I also have a company that's called the Organic Endeavors, and so you can find that at organicendeavors.com. That's the two best places to find me.
So LinkedIn and then organicendeavors.com. Who's the type of company or person that works with you? What's the problem?
So as you mentioned, I do a lot of consulting around smaller sales and marketing teams for small companies, startups that are trying to grow, and they usually invest in some sales and marketing software that's called a CRM system for customer relationship management. And so I usually work with them to help them set that up so that their marketing campaigns and programs get adequately mapped into their software so that they can collect the data that they need to have insights and make better decisions around how their company is growing or not growing and in areas where they can improve.
Yeah. Jim, tell us who you are, what you do, and how people can connect with you.
I'm Jim Karwisch. I run a company called Untangled Narrative. You can reach that at untanglednarrative.com. I work with individuals one-on-one. I also work with small groups, and there is a community that we're in beta right now. You can join it if you want to. You can find that at the website as well. You can also find me on social media pretty much anywhere at Jim Prov Untangled.
And that he'll be launching the new podcast, Everything is Narrative, which I'll be participating in to break it in. get it going. And my name is Jason Scott Montoya. I work with organizations to help them amplify their income and their influence through internet marketing channels, content creation. And this has been a Share Life Academy workshop. I'm excited to have dived into this topic that requires much more time, but has gotten us a tip of the iceberg. We'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.